Hi, everyone.
Hey, Jason.
Okay, I'm Jason Schwartz. As mentioned, I am a partner at Fried Frank, which is a global law firm headquartered in DC. I personally am or headquartered in New York. I'm personally in DC. The world revolves around me, clearly, in my mind. So I'm co-head of digital assets. I'm also a tax partner by trade. We at Fried Frank work with fintechs, banks, centralized exchanges, decentralized autonomous organizations, asset managers. So we really see a full 360-degree view of the digital assets space. Brian, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Brian Trunzo, Metaverse Lead at Polygon Studios. Polygon Studios is the business arm of Polygon, sort of the biz dev, marketing, and partner success team of Polygon. Your guy on the inside at the protocol to help you navigate the protocol, giving tech integration support, partner success, and marketing support to those who are building decentralized applications across any culturally relevant sphere. That's how I would sort of position it. So anything from entertainment to gaming to digital transformation, so innovation. My background is a bit non-linear, to say the least. I guess Jason will laugh at that because we actually started our careers together at Cadwalader, Wickersham, and Taft as young first-year associates. So this is actually my third career, ironically. Went from being a financial services attorney, having worked for Stephen Lofchi, who is now a partner at Fried Frank with Jason. Moved into small business ownership. I owned a fashion retail operation and designer store. Sold those businesses and found myself in this weird nebulous world of trend forecasting. And that is when I sort of was crypto-pilled, if you will. In 2017, I was talking to my clients, mostly contemporary and designer brands, luxury houses, about what the kids were getting into so that they could design products for said kids. And at the time, I had crypto-pilled myself, and people started talking about NFTs even before the ERC 721 contract, which enables NFTs, was developed. And I started pushing a narrative that this idea of self-expression and digitally scarce goods would collide for mostly fashion brands, but any brand that was looking to get into sort of new product lines. And from there, I found myself going deeper and deeper down the crypto rabbit hole until I ended up at Polygon.
So the name of this panel is Keeping It Legal, but I sort of want to take a step back because everyone knows that the legal landscape, to the extent there is one, is highly uncertain around crypto. But I would say that like everything in law is based on substance, right? I mean, maybe not everything, but like most things are based on substance. And so, in order to understand the legal landscape to the extent there is one in crypto, I think you really have to understand what is going on here, right? And we've heard a lot of buzzwords, today and yesterday, but I really want to drill down into sort of what all of this means, right? Does anyone here, or does everyone here know what it actually means to own crypto? Like what self-custody is, what a wallet is? Show of hands. Pretty good. Do you wanna give it a shot, Brian?
Yeah, maybe I'll speak practically about it because oftentimes people who have not actually engaged with self-custody with a non-custodial wallet, the concept of owning your own money can be sort of weird because for hundreds of years, it's been a very lucrative business for other people to own your money on your behalf, right? And that's why we pay the fees that we pay to have the convenience of someone owning our money and sort of, providing it to us for a fee as well at the point of sale when you go to an ATM and you're charged a fee to actually take it out. So this idea of owning your own money and the responsibility that really comes with it, particularly in my space, in the quote-unquote, as I said earlier, culturally relevant space, working with large IP holders, brands, entertainment companies, there's this narrative that using crypto is hard it's private keys and MetaMask and all the UX frictions. And it's hard because it's technically intense, and there's a deep responsibility on one to maintain his or her private keys. So that's sort of my view on the space. I think over time, the UX and UI frictions go away, but the grand narrative here is that owning your own money is hard and scary.
Okay, I'm gonna give it a shot, and then tell me where I get it right or wrong. So imagine that there's a locus, in cyberspace. It's like on the blockchain, and that locus is accessible to anyone who has what's called a private key or a seed phrase. The seed phrase is 24 random words. So what does it mean to access that locus? Well, so there's a bunch of stuff credited to there, and accessing it just basically means that you can transfer that stuff if you want, right? Now, when people talk about wallets, a wallet is really just a user interface for accessing that locus. No one has a word for that locus, right? Let's call it my bags, right? So my bags are somewhere in cyberspace. And when people talk about setting up a MetaMask wallet or, a Ledger hardware wallet or whatever, what they're really talking about is just a user interface for accessing that. But if anyone else, figures out your 24-word seed phrase, they can access that, okay? So that's what a wallet is, and anything credited to, this locus. And by the way, you can name your locus. So my, one of my, sort of loci is cryptotaxguy.eth. Right? So I have, a wallet that allows me to interact with everything that's in cryptotaxguy.eth. And in cryptotaxguy.eth, I have a bunch of crypto tokens, and I have a bunch of NFTs. Now, if I want to transfer anything out or do a transaction or whatever, I need a little bit of something else, right? I need a little bit of something called gas. And on the Ethereum blockchain, that gas is actually Ether. So, why does Ether have value as a token? Well, it has value because it's gas. In order to, let's say, for me to send my cryptode, which, by the way, is an NFT that I'm wearing on my lapel here, to Brian, I would have to not just sort of submit a transaction to the blockchain, send cryptode number 761 to briantrunzo.eth. I would also have to pay a little bit of gas, and that gas is denominated in ETH. So people need ETH, right? I'm saying all of this, by the way, because I think that for brands, the biggest opportunity is to abstract all of this away, because this is really complicated, right? I don't know, Brian, what are your thoughts on that?
That's something that I deal with pretty much every day. We recently did a deal with Starbucks where Starbucks will be moving their loyalty rewards program over the course of years. It will take time. This is not meant to supplement their Web 2 app, which has over 60 million daily users overnight. That's not going to happen, right? It will dovetail at some point. But they're moving their loyalty rewards program eventually into Web 3. They're going to allow their users of their app, which is becoming a decentralized application, to actually own their on-chain history, their in-store and digital history, right? Own their loyalty rewards points and use them in other composable ways within the Starbucks ecosystem, but also without it, sort of alongside it with affiliates who are tapping into their ecosystem. So with that, on the concept of gas, you talk to someone like a Starbucks about developing an application that potentially millions of users will use, and the friction of trying to get existing customers to understand that you need a fraction of Matic, which is our gas token on Polygon, to pay for the transaction, it's just a non-starter. Trying to educate people that you need to somehow acquire crypto to transact with this program. So on Polygon, and this is not unique to Polygon, there are other blockchains that do similar things. We abstract this away through some of our ecosystem partners particularly Biconomy and Open Zeppelin, with a concept called meta-transactions. And this is just one of the innovations that's happening sort of at the UI, UX level to make it easier. So it's not about the cost of gas, right? It's the UI, UX, the friction for the consumer. And what meta-transaction allows IP holders to do is to have a relayer pay for gas on behalf of the user, where the user signs the transaction, has a flow that is very similar to a Web 2 sort of flow that they're used to, pay the gas on behalf of the user, and then just hit the DAP, in this case, the IP holder, Starbucks, with a bill at the end of the month, right? And you do the math, and it's pretty simple. You know, the average transaction's about a penny for an NFT transaction. On Polygon, you do 1 million transactions in a month, $10,000. Pretty de minimis for Starbucks to actually cover the cost, this deep friction for their users.
Right. Like gas is not that much. But you know, so if you think of if you want a mental model for a blockchain, what it really is like a big bulletin board, right? And again, like cryptotaxguy.eth is just one, you know, corner of the bulletin board, and briantrunzo.eth.
Oh, it's just Trunzo. I have the last
Trunzo.eth. Okay, Trunzo.eth is another corner of the bulletin board. And in order to change information on the bulletin board, you need to submit a little bit of gas, and that gas is denominated in the native token of the applicable blockchain. So, you know, and then on top of that blockchain, you know, anything else can reside. So NFTs, other fungible tokens, whatever. But you can think of the native token when people talk about utility tokens. The native token is a utility token in that it's you know, being used for something. Now, there are other apps, or people call them dApps, but there are other apps in crypto that have their own utility tokens, right? I don't know, Brian. Do you have any examples? But what I'm trying to do is draw a distinction between sort of the gas token and then like some other utility token that an app requires you to use.
I definitely want to talk about the distinction between dApps and apps. I hope over time there will be no distinctions. I find it smarmy and sort of weird when someone says, well, it's a dApp, not an app. It's just, let's get past that. But yes, utility tokens, ERC20s in the Ethereum ecosystem and in the Polygon ecosystem, anyone that's compatible with Ethereum, there are many. There will probably be an infinite amount of them, and many of them will actually have no utility really and will go to zero. But you know, a good instance of a utility token would be within the metaverse, right? So people in this room may have heard of a Decentraland or a Sandbox, these immersive 3D environments that are meant to compete with the likes of Roblox and Minecraft. Really a social layer, a visual social layer, and the way that I like to talk about that social layer is it kind of competes with social media. It's like an immersive Twitter Spaces that's always on and persistent that you could just go there and sort of interact. But in the instance of a Sandbox, their token is sand. In the instance of a Decentraland, their token is mana. And those tokens have utility within those worlds. It's the unit of account within those worlds. It's not the only unit of account. You can use other crypto within those worlds. But you can also stake it, earn rewards, and sort of forge and craft items, wearables, cosmetics within those worlds by having these tokens.
Yeah, so you can think of like dApp layer utility tokens as basically the native currency of some app, right? So like you have the currency of the blockchain, which is just the gas. And then like if you want to create some world, right? Actually, like Bored Apes would be another one, right? They have the ape token. So if you want to create some world, you can say like, oh, our world uses this token. Now, things get a little more complicated, but I want to actually switch to NFTs because I think a lot of people here are probably like really interested in NFTs. NFTs, I think, form the sort of core of the metaverse, right? So what's the difference between, you know, an NFT and a fungible token?
Yeah, an NFT is basically a very unique, literally non-fungible version, like it's a hash on the blockchain, a very unique version of a digital asset, right? And there's a finite number of them. Prior to developing the ERC 721 and non-fungible tokens, the concept of digitally scarce, provably hashed items just simply didn't exist, right? So anyone can copy a JPEG or an MP3 or any digital file ad infinitum. There was no provenance. You couldn't prove that you owned it. Actually, you didn't own it. It was a license to use, right? So if you're playing Fortnite and you purchase a skin within that game, one, you don't know how many skins were made, and two, you can't use it outside of that ecosystem, and three, it's not unique to you in any sort of way, right? So to draw an analog to the physical world of like non-fungible items that you own in the physical world, this concept of ownership versus licensing, it would almost be as if you wore, let's say, a Ralph Lauren shirt into a Tommy Hilfiger store, and the folks at Ralph Lauren called you up and said you violated the terms of service, you can't do that, like, because you don't own the shirt, you're just licensing it, and that you had to take it off, and you violated the terms of service. That was the reality prior to NFTs, right? Everything was digitally licensed. Now you actually own it the way you do in the real world, and you can wear it, use it, composably develop new programs on top of it inside these virtual worlds the way you would in the real world. So in the instance of that Ralph Lauren shirt in the real world, I could put a patch on it, because I own it, it's mine, and I could go get a patch, which in the virtual world would be another NFT, and affix it to that smart contract in that virtual world. So I rambled a little bit. I think I hit your question, or at least the spirit of it.
But NFTs also can be like, can represent multiple things at once. And I'll say, so now to start bringing the law into this, I'll say one of the reasons for, the lack of clarity in the legal landscape is that tokens, both fungible and non-fungible, can act as many things at once, right? So in the case of like Ether, as an example, I refer to it as gas, right? So you need ETH to do a transaction. But you know what? Like lots of NFTs, their sale prices, by the way, if you want to buy an NFT on the secondary market, the one platform is OpenSea. You can think of it as like an eBay for NFTs. And the vast majority of, and people can list their NFTs for sale, the vast majority of NFTs listed for sale on OpenSea are denominated in Ether. So Ether also, it's not just gas, it's not just utility, it's also like a currency. Now, let's sort of give an example in the NFT world. So I'm wearing a cryptoad. It's a pixelated toad designed by the pixel artist Gremplin. There are 6,969 cryptodes, because everything in crypto is a meme. You can buy cryptodes on the secondary market on OpenSea. And if you own a cryptode, there are a couple of things that you should be aware of. Number one, you don't actually own the copyright to anything. So when Gremplin created cryptodes, he also made all of the images, he explicitly made the images CC0, which is a basically Creative Commons license. So anyone can use them, anyone can create derivative works. So what do you own? Well, you own provenance, right? So like the artist created these tokens and declared that these are the official ownership tokens. But in addition, there's something really interesting about NFTs. NFTs are you can embed royalty streams in NFTs. So anytime an NFT sells on OpenSea, some percentage, anytime a cryptode sells on OpenSea, some percentage of the purchase price goes somewhere. And that can actually be effectively embedded in the NFT. In this case, in the case of cryptodes, the royalties go to a treasury on-chain. Right? So like some portion of ETH gets diverted to another locus on the blockchain. And who controls that locus? It's actually the owners of the cryptodes. So collectively, like you don't just own this image and provenance. You actually also own the right to vote on how this constantly seeded treasury is used. And typically, like the cryptodes vote to, donate to, cancer research or American Red Cross or whatever. And to me, that's something that's really, really exciting, because suddenly you have this IP, you have like brand ambassadors, and you have people who actually can also control the direction of the brand, right?
Yeah, in a way, you're turning passive consumerism. Like in the past, one would just buy, in this case, art, really, for the sake of owning the art. They like it. Into sort of like stakeholders who become super fans and almost like brand ambassadors, to your point, on behalf of the brand. And in this case, the brand is Cryptodes. And the innovation that I see in my world, touching media properties and entertainment, is finding new models of financing, producing, and distributing content, right? If anyone has worked in entertainment, you know that those are three discrete worlds. Getting something financed is very difficult. Finding the talent to actually produce the thing is arguably more difficult, and then trying to situate it for success and distribute it to the masses is probably the most difficult. And if you could bootstrap a community of superfans who are invested in the project from the earliest stages and help actually bootstrap and finance the thing, right? I'm of the view that if your community is financing it and have skin in the game, that you are more situated for success on the latter part, the distribution, and can figure out collectively the production. Now, there's a messy middle there with production. There's an argument that, Disney is Disney because it's not distributed, right? Because they have the talent within, and that'll get figured out over time. But it presents, this whole paradigm just presents a new and interesting way to bring those three discrete worlds together.
Well, I mean, your point about Disney is really, I think, an important point that we should focus on. So, and what I hope is being made clear here is that NFTs are just a tool, and they can sort of be whatever the publisher wants them to be, right? So in the case of Cryptodes, I said they're CC0. What that means is that, potentially some hate group can co-opt the Cryptode brand, right, and start using, this my toad, right?
He's adorable.
He's adorable, and I don't think he stands for hatred. I don't think it would be a particularly compelling hate group symbol, but in theory, it's possible for someone to use this image, and no one would have any recourse, right? But the publisher has the option, right? I mean, we're back in. I mean, people used to say code is law at the inception of blockchain tech, but really law is law, and if you're, let's just take a total, hypothetical. If you're, Mattel, and you decide to put out, Barbie branded NFTs, you as the IP publisher have the right to determine how people are able to use them. So if you look at, Bored Apes are a very crypto-native brand. They provide their owners with, unlimited commercial use rights to sort of take their own Bored Ape and open a restaurant under the Bored Apes, image or name or whatever. Cryptodes, anyone can do anything. Some of the fine art that I collect, you really can't do anything. It's similar to collecting traditional art. I'm not allowed to monetize. I own the artwork, but I don't own the copyright at all, and I have really no monetization rights. But let's take the Mattel example. So because actually let's go back to the example that I gave last night. You weren't here because you were late to the dinner. But so I gave an example last night. So cryptos are a purely digital asset, but NFTs can also represent physical assets, right? So the example that I gave last night in my maybe prolonged toast was a wine store, totally hypothetical, a wine distributor. And a wine distributor wants people to be able to, buy and sell wine bottles without shipping them all over the world, and also wants to build a, better brand recognition for itself. So one possible business model is create NFTs that represent specific bottles of wine and that are also, branded with that wine distributor's name. Now suddenly you have, people can trade those NFTs, and you can embed royalties in the NFTs that go back to the wine distributor, and that can pay for the wine distributor to store that wine until someone finally wants to drink one of those bottles and can redeem that NFT with the distributor and get the wine shipped to them, right? So you can also use those NFTs. So those NFTs can represent the actual wine, right? They can also represent, let's say, access to a token-gated chat room, right, on Discord or something. They can also, if you want to, and now I'm extending the analogy beyond what I said last night, maybe a portion of the royalties can actually also be diverted to an on-chain treasury, which then allows the owners of those, those NFTs to vote on, donating to charity or building out some ecosystem, right? My point is that maybe you can sort of start to see how the regulatory landscape, the current regulatory landscape isn't really sufficient to address crypto, because you have these NFTs that represent at once a physical object, membership in a community, and also effectively like a partnership interest that allows people to collectively vote on how to deploy an on-chain treasury. What do you think about that, Brian?
You just said some really great stuff, and I hope everyone was paying attention because there's a lot to unpack. But my big takeaway, aside from the regulatory part, because just as the regulatory framework is ill-equipped to sort of like handle NFTs, I am ill-equipped to handle the regulatory framework because I'm quite rusty in my practice. But all joking aside, one big theme that I pulled out of what you were saying was this elasticity of the word gaming. And that may not have been apparent to everyone in the room, but if you think about it, I think it becomes apparent, this idea that NFTs are just a really great way to gamify behavior, to turn people into stakeholders and incentivize them to earn more, right? And in the case of the wine example that you gave, I think that was pretty apparent. Now, some people may be thinking to themselves, well, why does that have to be on blockchain? Can't you just do that on a private ledger? The answer is yes, but when you have a non-transparent private ledger, it's not censorship resistant, and collusion and all sorts of behavior from questionable to nefarious can arise. So to use an example that everyone in this room probably has touched at some point in their life is sort of the McDonald's Monopoly game. I mean, how many people had Park Place and were looking for, I forget the other one, because you never got the other one because it probably didn't exist. Like, everyone had Park Place when they were like 12 years old. They're like, oh my God, I'm going to win $1 million. All I have to do is find a friend who has the other one. But the other one didn't exist, right? So if this is on blockchain and it's public and you know that there are 3 of them in the world, the game now the game is on. It's a real game, right? And if it's composable and you can actually now McDonald's would have to open up parts of this IP, and Monopoly would have to open up parts of this IP to allow the public to sort of build upon it. But if they wanted to, they can incentivize you to develop stuff on Park Place and turn it into a virtual world where there are stakeholders who kind of hang out there and do cool stuff because they're McDonald's superfans and they're eating McDonald's for free now because they've added value to the system. I'm going on and being very reductive.
No. Okay. So here I'm gonna share like an embarrassing experience. What made me most bullish on NFTs was I was scammed out of a number of NFTs. Okay, someone I was a total noob, and someone posed as someone I thought I knew, and we were gonna do a private trade for an NFT for ETH, and pursuant to a private trade, someone basically writes a smart contract that the smart contract is supposed to intermediate the trade, and the smart contract basically says, okay, like Jason puts in an NFT into the contract, counterparty puts in a set amount of ETH, and once those 2 preconditions are satisfied, the smart contract automatically distributes the NFT to the counterparty and the ETH to Jason. They wrote it so that the contract actually also gave them the ability to access all of the NFTs that were in my wallet. So they stole all of my NFTs. Very embarrassing. But I learned something, because immediately after that, the communities that those NFTs sort of were a part of actually came together to retrieve my NFTs for me. So what scammers do is, as soon as they acquire those NFTs, they sell them as quickly as possible, because I could go to OpenSea and tell them, oh, I was just scammed, and OpenSea will immediately red flag the NFTs, making them illiquid. They can still be transferred sort of privately, but OpenSea is a huge marketplace. If you can't list on OpenSea, then you have a lot less liquidity. So scammers just try to offload NFTs as quickly as possible. So the community actually put very low bids on these NFTs, and the scammer accepted them. And then people returned my NFTs to me, either for free or like splitting the cost with me. That would never happen if someone came into my apartment and stole the traditional art off of my walls. No one would care. But because all of this is on a transparent public ledger, everyone sees who everyone else is that owns this particular artwork. And suddenly you have a sense of community that doesn't exist currently in the sort of traditional collectibles and art world, where because everyone is a brand ambassador, everyone wants to make sure that everyone else is having a good time. Because the detriment inures to everyone. Like if people are having a terrible time, if I lost my crypto and the community didn't come together to retrieve my crypto to me, then like I'm a pissed off customer, and I'm a customer of all of these people, not just the artist Gremplin who designed these cryptodes.
Your example makes me think of another example in the world of scam that dovetails into sort of the legalities of ownership, which hopefully you can fill, the voids that I leave open. And that's the example of Seth Green of Robot Chicken fame and Austin Powers fame. He's sort of a prolific content creator, having really innovated in the short form content space for years. And he's a big NFT believer because over time it's been very difficult for him. Now that he is a known quantity, it's a little bit easier, but it was difficult for him to get things financed, right? These like 6-minute shorts, people are like, how do I monetize this? I'm not giving you money to like have fun with your friends. And this is why NFTs were really interesting to him. He's like, wow, I could bootstrap my community. They could fund it. I could give them incentives to stay members of the community, flywheel it, and I don't need financiers, right? So it resonated with him. But the scam part, where he was scammed, I don't know how the scam was conducted, but he was in the process of creating content, shorts, for his Bored Ape that he owned. I think it was called Jenkins the Valet. I think that was the name.
Yeah.
The details are fuzzy. But essentially, someone had stolen his ape in some sort of way, and by virtue of no longer owning the ape, he couldn't make his show, which for NFT haters, like people who see some of the toxicity of, particularly young people, not always young people, who just think it's, up and to the right? I buy this dumb ape and it goes up 1,000x and I get rich, right? Like that's where the vitriol against NFTs come from culturally. A lot of people were very happy that Seth Green had lost his ape. But if you know sort of the background to the story, you can see there's a lot more there. That here was someone who wanted to create value for himself too. Of course, he's a capitalist. He wants to make money off of Jenkins the Valet, but he wanted to give value to the ape community, no longer could. So I don't know if you have a jumping off point to talk about the legalities of it.
Well, so yeah, I mean, you're raising a lot of interesting questions, including hearkening back to what I said, which is law, right? It's still unclear. So like if I steal your Bored Ape, let's say you're Seth Green and I steal your Bored Ape, is it really true that you no longer can make that movie or that short?
Do you think that there was a law school in the country somewhere that had a final exam on contracts and tort that had this in the? I think maybe.
Yeah. I think it's a good right because like in theory, and like ill-gotten, stolen, like it would be. It's hard for me to imagine a court saying, "Oh, now the thief owns this IP," right?
But it's less that the thief owns it and more that Seth Green no longer owns it in a way.
Unclear. And if you read the Bored Apes, by the way, anyone can go to like Yugo Labs' website and read the contract for the Bored Apes. It's there's some lack of clarity there on what you actually own. But let's pull back for a minute. I think we've teased out a couple of legal considerations, and we're not going to answer the questions. You have to put me on the clock for that. But there are a few things to consider. So like number one is custody, right? So like for both for you as a business, also for your consumers, you really have to think through this. The operational security in crypto is incredibly important. If you just own fungible tokens and you're not comfortable self-custodying them, there are great solutions, right? You could just hold them all on Coinbase or Kraken or Gemini, any centralized exchange, and effectively the centralized exchange is like a broker, right? You have an IOU from the centralized exchange. Hopefully the centralized exchange does not go the way of Voyager or Celsius or whatever. As long as they stay solvent, you will get your you can exchange your crypto for fiat at any point. But there aren't the same sorts of solutions for NFTs, or at least not as well known. So like thinking just both from a business perspective and from your consumer perspective, you really want to think about like how best to allow people to store this stuff, right? I work with asset managers, and some of them just have like a hardware wallet. Do you know what a hardware wallet is? Yeah. So yeah. So just like for those who weren't nodding, a hardware wallet is really just, it's again, a wallet is a user interface, but in order to access my crypto through my user interface on a hot wallet or like, a web-based wallet, I type in a PIN, right? Anytime I want to access, I type in a PIN. And in theory, some hacker looking at my computer screen can see what PIN I typed in, and then they can type in the same PIN on their side and access my crypto. A hardware wallet allows me to type in the PIN on like a thumb drive that basically then just authenticates to my, to the blockchain, basically, that I have, in fact, typed in the correct PIN. So, in other words, the PIN never actually touches the internet, so a hacker cannot sort of see what I'm typing in. So that's sort of one way, operational security is something really important. And if you're an asset manager or a business that just owns crypto or whatever, you have to sort of think about that. If you're thinking for your consumers, you also want to make things easy for them, I think. And again, like maybe for sort of lower value assets, you can just set up a wallet for them, right? And it can be a hot wallet, a wallet connected to the internet. And then if they really value the asset, they can transfer it out themselves, right? Any thoughts on that before I move on to?
No, I think you said it very succinctly, and the way I view it, it's sort of like whatever I want in Fort Knox is on my hardware ledger, and whatever pocket money I want sloshing around to use for the day is on the hot wallet.
Yeah, exactly. Remember, transactions, unless you make them reversible, are irreversible on the blockchain. But you can make them reversible, but just as a default, they're irreversible. That's why this is so important. Custody, operational security is really important. So like that's sort of silo one of the legal considerations. Silo two, I would say, is IP, right? So as I sort of indicated, if you create an NFT, you have to decide like who owns the IP, what are the use cases, right? I think we already sort of beat that to death, but do you have any?
No, just I guess one last word on it. Just my perspective on the space is the best stories ever told in terms of IP have been folklore, right? From the Bible straight through to King Arthur and even Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It's in the public domain, and folks like Disney, have taken these pieces of IP and told the greatest stories we've ever heard that have lasted, time infinitum. Greek mythology, Roman mythology, no one owns it. And I personally see sort of the NFT boom and CC0 and other movements that sort of live alongside all of this as sort of the harbinger of a great content revolution that we will see personally.
It's a network, right? You're allowing people to create this like communal network. I mean, the cryptodes now have like hundreds of derivative projects that are sort of built around them, and they're all sort of composable into different sort of experiences. And it's the users, it's the brand ambassadors that created that, not Gremlin. He just put out these silly pixelated images. Right? I think silo number 3 would be. I don't want to say securities law because it'll scare people away, but like to the extent that you have a communally governed, project, or sort of half communally governed. Like in theory, you could imagine. You can imagine a brand sort of allowing the community to vote for different things, but ultimately there's the publisher, right, Disney or Mattel or whoever, sort of having the ultimate admin key, so to speak, right, being the one to veto. If in my example the wine collectors decide to donate to like the Lazarus Group in North Korea, presumably like the wine distributor would say, no, you have to choose a charity. To the extent you have an organization, you do have to think about a lot of like regulatory and tax considerations around that, right? If you have an organization, just because it lives on chain doesn't mean that the law does not treat it as some kind of organization. So it might be a partnership. It might be a corporation. It might be, if it's highly financialized, it might be subject to SEC or CFTC regulation. So, it's something worth calling a lawyer about. Suffice it to say. I don't know, any thoughts on that?
It's probably the one area I'm least equipped to add context to, but I will say it does stifle innovation, right? That's the underlying sort of theme here. Folks who are creating decentralized autonomous organizations, these DAOs that you may have heard of, the tax treatment of it, again, unqualified to talk about, but really makes it such that innovation is stifled until there's a framework to understand what you can and cannot do there, because at the end of the day, if you're treated as a partnership and everyone's liable for the taxes, it's like, did we ever have a DAO?
Right,
like,
right. Oh, and by the way, so DAO, I think you've heard the term bandied about today and yesterday. DAO, decentralized autonomous organization. There's no real accepted definition of that. So some people say it's a chat room with a bank account, which it's kind of cute. A little reductive, but a DAO is basically any organization that lives on chain. Right? I mean, people will say, oh, that some of them are not decentralized, some of them are not autonomous. It's unclear if they're even organizations, but you could arguably say that the cryptodes are a DAO because they collectively govern this on-chain treasury, right? But yeah, so we represent a number of DAOs at Freed Frank, and there really is no answer on whether a DAO is an entity for tax and regulatory purposes. Oftentimes, you have sort of an umbrella, collection of people who comprise the DAO, and then you set up special purpose vehicles for the DAO, engaging in certain activities, depending on like what jurisdiction they're engaging in those activities in. So it gets very complicated, but it's something worth considering. We have like 1 minute left, so I want to stop there and see if anyone has any questions. Hopefully this was like just a good sort of rudimentary introduction.
We have a question in the back here that I think is really good.
Hey, thank you very much. I think it's a question that all of the publicly traded corporations would have around holding Bitcoin on their balance sheet. And right now it's a little murky because the way they classify it under goodwill, where all digital assets are like indefinite lived, intangible assets. And I think a question a lot of people have, so it's on the behalf of everyone, is what are the tax implications specifically about holding Bitcoin, holding Ether, holding Matic, right, on their balance sheet? And because some people are interested in doing that as part of a treasury function if they don't liquidate it. So, Jason, if you could please speak about that.
Yeah, so the tax implication, the question was, what are the tax implications of holding crypto on your balance sheet, right? The tax implications are actually, so for a U.S. entity, the tax implications are actually like fairly simple, I dare to say. A layer 1 token, so like gas basically, it is really just treated as a capital asset, just property for tax purposes. So, if you hold Ether or Bitcoin or Matic on your balance sheet, you're not deemed part of an entity. You really are just holding something akin to stock on your balance sheet. There are, if you sell at a gain, you have capital gain. If you sell at a loss, you have capital loss. There are, much bigger questions around things like staking. I'm going to take like 30 seconds, even though the timer is out. The way Ethereum works is, there's this bulletin board, right? And the validators, the nodes, are collectively maintaining this bulletin board. By the way, you can run a node off of your laptop. So think of hundreds of thousands of people all over the world basically collectively maintaining this bulletin board. That's what people mean when they say it's decentralized, right? It can't be shut down unless every government all over the world storms the houses of every single person who is running a node, which is just practically impossible. The way you validate is you have to ante up or stake some Ether to the network. That's your ante. And the reason you have to ante up is that if you don't comply with the protocol rules, if you program your node to submit a fake transaction or something, the protocol detects that and slashes your Ether or destroys it, right? So that's the stick that ensures that all nodes are being honest. The carrot for running a validation node is that you get a yield on your staked Ether. So a lot of institutions are looking at I'm going to buy Ether and I'm going to stake it. So I'm just earning this, essentially risk-free yield denominated in Ether. And staking is subject to a lot of tax uncertainty. The IRS appears to believe that staking rewards as received are taxed as ordinary income. There's a there's a case on staking called Jarrett, where the Jarretts paid their tax and then sued for a refund under the theory that staking rewards are actually self-created property. A farmer is not taxed on harvesting crops. They're taxed on selling those crops, right? And similarly, to the extent that the Ether is inflationary, it would be overtaxation to tax the value of that ETH in total, which, there's an argument that it's unconstitutional to overtax. That's not really income. So the Jarretts sued, and the IRS, rather than going to court, gave them their refund. So, you have this, so the IRS doesn't want a court to decide how staking rewards are taxed, but the IRS also hasn't actually issued guidance on how staking rewards are taxed. So we're in this sort of no man's land of not really knowing how staking is taxed.
Great. You guys have given us so much to think about. And remember, if you submitted a question that didn't get answered in the Slido deck, or you have questions, put them in the LinkedIn group, and know that after the conference, any questions that weren't answered in Slido will be compiled. We'll find you answers, and we'll get you what you need to know.
Oh, can I say one more thing? So there's a Fried Frank table out there. We have cards, two QR codes on the cards. One is to all of our thought leadership, and a lot of it is pretty rudimentary. So and then a lot of it is very advanced. So there's something there for everyone. There's also a QR code to a podcast that I recently did for Encrypted Economy, which goes through a lot of these issues in greater detail. And I hope it's of enjoyment to some of you.
Definitely grab that. And thank you to Fried Frank for being our founding sponsor. Go to break, be back here at 11. We'll kick off the next section of the day. Thank you.